Welcome all you CAN TV viewers. My name is Bob Moore. I'm the host of this show tonight, and it's going to be about democracy for the USA. And I have with me a guest, Ted Aranda, who is a member, a co-founder, probably the main founder of the organization. We're going to go over a little bit of the history. We sprang from the Occupy movement last year when that rebellion, I think you'd call it more than a movement, when it kind of lost direction and momentum. And there weren't many people showing up at the General Assemblies, just a handful, and it got to the point where it was sort of ridiculous. So we decided to go on and found Democracy for the USA because it is the principles of true democracy that we're more interested in. Right, Ted?
Exactly. Occupy, we tried to make it more of a democracy-oriented organization, but folks weren't that much into building an actual democracy. They had all kinds of ideas. They were into protest. Even toward the end, they weren't doing much of anything actually, but the ideas that they had were more anarchistic, socialistic, and we tried to infuse an ideology, an alternate ideology of trying to get democracy specifically and in a concrete form. But those people at Occupy Chicago weren't that much into it, so and it was dwindling, as you said, so we had to move on. Yeah.
Right. We attempted to have an Occupy May Day Speak Out last year in 2013, and I was planning on shooting that, doing some video of it, and having members of Occupy Chicago speak out and voice their opinions on the country as it was, but no one showed up. So it was a kind of a washout. And actually, there were a couple people, and one was Grayson. She spoke out, and she was one of the original occupiers. I mean, she bought a one-way ticket to New York City and was there on the first day at Zuccotti Park. In fact, I have a little video that we can roll of her at the May Day Speak Out.
I'll just say, yeah, I went to Zuccotti Park. I was there from the first day on September 17th. I flew there from Chicago with a one-way ticket, and I went because I felt like there weren't any political parties or movements that I knew about that really reflected what I felt like needed to happen in the world. And I still don't know what needs to happen in the world, but I think that the first step is that we need to have places and forums for people to talk about that question, because I think that most people assume that the way the world is run now is the way it will continue to run and must run, and change must happen within that system. And so I really think that the importance of Occupy and other movements, other protest movements, or any movement that has visions of the future that fall outside the sphere of continuing forth with the status quo, that's what's really important right now, so people can be having that conversation. And whatever else has or hasn't accomplished, I think it has and continues to keep that conversation going, and I think that's what's really important now.
Okay, so that was Grace, and she kind of exemplified the feeling of the occupiers at that time. They were looking for some serious change. And they did bring into the vocabulary of the country the 99% versus the 1%, and they showed us the economic, brought the limelight on the economic disparity. But other than that, they didn't have much of a plan, right? I mean, they had a tactic of occupying the spaces, but they didn't go much beyond that. Like, I haven't read it thoroughly, but I gave you that book on David Graeber, wrote The Democracy Movement, or what was that?
What was it called?
The Democracy Project.
Yeah, something like that.
I think.
Yeah, I did read that book actually, and it's a pretty good read. It tells you what people were thinking. David Graeber was one of the founders of Occupy Wall Street,
Right.
and that book told you what he was thinking, what others in his group were thinking, and their tactics. But as you were saying, they didn't have much of a program for going beyond protesting or bringing up this theme of the 99% versus the 1%, which was a great theme.
Mm-hmm.
It was, and like you said, it was a rebellion. It was an explosion.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah, exactly. And it energized so many people around the country. There were occupies in countless cities.
I was thrilled when Occupy
Right.
first happened, and just as Michael Moore was, and I was so happy for Michael Moore
Right.
because
Yeah.
he was really getting
Yeah.
depressed the way things were going after the Citizens United decision and all that. He was like, and I saw him on Democracy Now!, I believe, and he was at the end of his rope, you know.
Well,
But then when the Occupy thing happened, it sort of enlivened him and enlivened me and quite a few people, and then this. Well, of course, it met with a lot of opposition from the cities, and some of the cities kind of violently broke up
Right.
the encampments, and that might have scared enough people off that they didn't want to keep doing that. But I don't know if that would have really blossomed into much anyway, bigger encampments.
Well,
I don't know.
yeah, no, I think the problems with Occupy were, the major problems with Occupy were internal and ideological. My sister, who is no radical, but she's sympathetic toward what I and us lefties do.
Right.
She called me, or we were talking on the phone, and she said, Ted, this is the revolution. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, she's not one of the, she's not someone who
Yeah,
thinks that much about revolution.
I almost let myself think that too. I mean, it almost had the feeling like.
But my point is that outsiders, occupiers, of course, wanted to say, "Oh, this is great. This is the revolution. We're going to change things, etc." But people, observers like my sister, were excited about it as well. But either in that same conversation or maybe in another conversation, when we were talking about how Occupy was going downhill, she said, Ted, it's what is their plan? Okay, so you go out and protest, you go out and make noise, and then what? That in and of itself obviously isn't making the changes that you want.
Right.
We protested on the banksters stealing, on the environment, global warming, on
NATO.
On NATO, we had this huge.
ALEC.
ALEC.
Or was it? Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
American Legislative Exchange Council, these Republicans who are taking over all the state governments and implementing all these right-wing policies. Okay, so we protested countless times, and what did that do? What did that achieve concretely?
Right.
Practically nothing, literally. Okay.
Right.
So,
exactly.
And that was her point. This is an outside observer. It doesn't take, she's not a rocket scientist. She's a quite sharp, smart woman, but she's not a lefty intellectual. And she was pointing out these problems with occupiers. So what's next? What is the plan? What is the alternative? So that's
Right.
where I think we come in.
Right. Well, I don't want to spend too much time bashing
Right. Sure.
Occupy, but I think I have a little clip of you at the May Day Speak Out last year, and we can roll that right now just for a little history.
So what should I say? I mean,
Who is this? What's your name?
anything goes? Okay. My name's Ted. I'm with Occupy, and I had prepared a little speech, but the Speak Out didn't happen, But at any rate, what I was going to say is basically that the entire system has to go. This representative system has to go. We can't be continuing to just worry about this issue and that issue, this politician and that politician. Democrats have proven themselves to be corporatists, capitalist sympathizers as much as the Republicans. Elections just don't work. Obama is a perfect example of that. Perfect. He's like the perfect faux progressive candidate. Okay, if we elect somebody like this and he lets us down, who the hell do we expect to get that's going to be better than that? Okay, he's such a nice guy. You know, everybody's so cool with him. Okay, he's the coolest liberal, quote unquote. Okay, which means a capitalist, neoliberal. Okay, so the corporations win, as usual, and we just can't keep on playing this game. We have to take down this representative system, the system set by the Constitution, where we elect a few individuals to rule over us. That's what it boils down to. You can have Congress, you can have president, you can have city council, you can have mayors and division of powers and checks and balances and Supreme Court, and it's all a bunch of bullshit. It's a sophisticated tyranny of the rich. That's what it is. It's a dictatorship of the ruling class, because that's what we have, a ruling class government.
Okay, so that was your take on it at the time, and finally, as the last, well, it won't be the last mention of Occupy, but it's kind of wrapping up the Occupy subject for this show, will be a little clip of me, and I actually, I'm reading out I think it might have been their mission statement, or I think it's a 9 or 10 point, I don't know what you'd call it, charter
plan?
or something. That was the Occupy charter, maybe. And I was really impressed with it, and I read it out there for the speak out, and just to let people know kind of what Occupy was about. We'll roll that clip, and that'll be it for the Occupy clips. We envision 1. A truly free, democratic, and just society. 2. Where we, the people, come together and solve our problems by consensus. 3. Where people are encouraged to take personal and collective responsibility and participate in decision making. 4. Where we learn to live in harmony and embrace principles of toleration and respect for diversity and the differing views of others. 5. Where we secure the civil and human rights of all from violation by tyrannical forces and unjust governments. 6. Where political and economic institutions work to benefit all, not just the privileged few, the 1%. 7. Where we provide full and free education to everyone, not merely to get jobs, but to grow and flourish as human beings. And 8. Where we value human needs over monetary gain to ensure decent standards of living, without which effective democracy is impossible. And 9. Where we work together to protect the global environment to ensure that future generations will have safe and clean air, water, and food supplies, and we'll be able to enjoy the beauty and bounty of nature that past generations have enjoyed. So that's a big task, but we've got to do it, and I'm just afraid that it's going to take some major catastrophe to get the majority of Americans to mobilize. Okay, now we're back to discuss democracy for the USA. And I think I'll let Ted take it from here, since it was mainly his impetus that started the group, and take it away.
Okay. Well, how this idea came up in my mind of trying to build a real democracy is a kind of a long story. But I wrote this book. I guess you can see it from that angle, that camera. And the book is titled The Racket and the Answer, and the subtitle is just as important, The Representative System and the Democratic Alternative.
Right.
And so...
Is that my copy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I didn't bring my copy. But anyway, so what we need in this country, as far as we're concerned, us, Democracy for the USA, is actual democracy. We don't have democracy right now. We have a representative system.
Well, let me butt in
Sure.
here just a second. What is democracy?
Okay.
How's that for an easy one? Here, I've got a pile of books. Strong Democracy, just Democracy, Thomas Jefferson on Democracy, and Dollarocracy, which is pretty appropriate for today. And I even have somewhere there Arthur Robbins' book,
Yeah, this is
Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained.
Yeah, that's a great book.
That is a great book.
Yeah.
The True Meaning of Democracy is the
Yeah.
subtitle. That is a fine book.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, democracy. It's an easy thing to describe and yet a difficult thing to describe. And actually, we have a website, democracyfortheusa.org. I happen to be the webmaster, but on that there is a clip, and I think I'm going to run that now too, because that will kind of give you an idea. The title of the clip is "Representative Democracy is Not Democracy." Take a look at this.
The whole idea behind democracy is that the general public should participate in making the decisions that affect their lives. Democracy, like freedom, can take many forms. Even in totalitarian states, there are some freedoms. Likewise with a democracy. There are some states, such as Cuba and Iran, that practice small amounts of democracy, and yet they are limited to a narrow range of options, and most would say they are not democratic at all. There are generally two different types of democracy, representative and direct. However, representative democracy is not democratic. Direct, or participatory democracy, allows the voice of the public to be heard, unhindered in its purest form. This allows the members to be self-managed without the use of bureaucrats and politicians. I think we can all agree that politicians are corrupt. Every day, someone is being accused of and exposed for their crimes, ranging from perjury to theft of public money. Society should not be forced to choose the best of two evils. The Center for Responsive Politics, the leading nonpartisan organization that records money in politics, found that in the 2008 elections, 93% of the House of Representative races and 94% of the Senate were won by the candidate who spent the most money. This reality is not just reserved for Congress. Barack Obama also outspent all other candidates, including John McCain, to win the presidency. Much of the money that comes from political financing is produced by corporate donations, political action committees, and wealthy individuals. Top industries literally spent billions of dollars to pay for our current Congress. In 2008, there were 14,800 lobbyists who spent $3.3 billion to influence politicians. This is pretty amazing considering there are only 535 members of Congress. This shows that one person, one vote is just a myth. It is money, not people, that decide the fate of elections and our lives. Politicians do not represent the public. Instead, they represent industries who pay for them to be there. In order to win elections, the politicians must hire teams of people who turn them into demagogues, who use certain phrases, dress in certain clothes, use ambiguous forms of speech about ideas that nearly 100% of the public agrees with, such as the right to freedom and democracy. Their speeches are rehearsed, studied, calculated, marketed, spun, and branded. In the meantime, politicians must hide their true motives, personality, vices, and beliefs. Because speeches are so vague, this causes people to interpret them to the point of conspiracy theories. Politicians may be moral as individual people, but by necessity, they must participate in a system which forces them to be dishonest. They cannot act and say what they want to say. Political representatives do not represent society because their actions are geared to appeal to the least common denominator. When they do act, we can see who they truly represent. According to a study from the University of Kansas, big companies that spent hundreds of millions lobbying successfully for tax breaks enacted in 2004 got a 22,000% return on that investment. Even worse are the companies who received money from the TARP bailouts. Those companies received 258,000% for the $114 million they spent on campaign donations and lobbying. Some companies, such as AT&T, give to both political parties in order to hedge their bets and guarantee access to the political realm. In 2008, they gave out $43 million in campaign contributions. 49% of that money went to the Democrats, and 51% went to the Republicans. Since 1990, AT&T has given to both political parties close to the same amount. There's a long history of campaign contributors being paid back with government jobs. Recently, Obama has been giving campaign bundlers, people who gather large sums of money for his presidential bid, major diplomatic positions including posts in Spain, Norway, Australia, Luxembourg, and the European Union. Obama has also given other posts to financial bundlers, including the job of Deputy of the United States Trade Representative. He has also posted delegates to the Organization of American States, the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, and to the UN Management and Reform. This is routine procedure for both Democrats and Republicans. There is also a history of the government working closely with the business sector, allowing executives to move from the private to the public sector and vice versa. The executives don't stop working for the benefit of the private sector while they are in public office. Companies pay to have access for their own people to sit at the table, creating favors they will receive, usually in the form of regulation and deregulation, tax breaks, and other gifts. While working for the Clinton administration, Robert Rubin helped to merge Citicorp and Travelers by deregulation. After his time with the Clinton administration, he went on to work for the merged company, Citigroup. Today, Robert Rubin is an economic advisor for the Obama administration. Elections are big business. Money always wins. The system of democracy should move from the bottom up. Instead, authority flows downward to shape people's thoughts, hopes, attitudes, and beliefs. Politicians tell people what they should think, dream, and who they should hate, fear, and worship. They shape who we are instead of the other way around. To win elections, our representatives acquiesce to money powers and comply to the public relation firms, the front groups, and the powerful think tanks to help manipulate the media. All of these groups collude in vast networks, propagating information and molding public opinion into what moneyed interests deem to be important, making sure that certain issues are not raised by minimizing debate, and attacking any group that threatens their own welfare. The greatest danger the system produces is the narrowing range of political debate. We are told again and again that the political spectrum is no broader than the range of Republican and Democrat, that society can only make decisions that fall into the realm of taxes, abortion, healthcare, and education. But even these issues fall into a limited range. The political realm has been virtually nullified. There is no meaningful change because the system of representative democracy, by its very nature, demands consistently flat results. It shouldn't be that every 2 to 4 years we leave our homes to vote for one of two people to become our representative. This one person is supposed to represent the public will and make decisions for every human being that they represent. It doesn't matter that 63% of Utah didn't vote for Obama, or that 58% of New York voted against Bush. They will have to listen and submit themselves to the rule of this human being that they have never met and will never meet. These outcomes are against the very idea of freedom. As President Bush always liked to say, "I am the decider." While some people found this statement undemocratic, it is the reality of our nation. All of this is not to say that democracy is inherently evil, but politicians are not representatives or even expressions of human wants, desires, or wishes. It's not that politicians want to be bureaucratic. They are bureaucrats. And it's not like some politicians are demagogues and others not. They all are. They have to be demagogues to win elections. Politicians may not like lying, pretending, spouting catchphrases, or even kissing babies. They have to take money for favors to help large corporations and industries if they want to win. It's easy to see that our politicians are anything but representative of the makeup of our society. Aside from the obvious race and gender gap, these people do not live in the same economic bracket as the rest of society. The personal finances in the House of Representatives averages out to about $5 million, while the typical senator household brings in closer to 16. Jane Harman of California leads the list with a net worth of almost $400 million. These Congress members are not a composite of American society. They do not live in the same houses as we do. They do not understand what it is like not to have health insurance. They do not understand the daily suffering of ordinary Americans. They don't work regular jobs. Some have never even been a part of the workforce. These so-called representatives fly in private jets, attend parties that we will never attend, eat at restaurants we could never afford, dress in clothes we will never wear, and relax on yachts we will only see in the movies. These people know nothing of our lives and our financial struggles. It has long been known that the Soviet style of economics does not work because a small group of elites cannot know all the intricacies and interactions of an entire functioning economy and society. It's just too complex. Only the people on the ground can have any true understanding of the needs and wants to fulfill their lives and thereby create a society that will fulfill the public's wishes. Our style of democracy shares the same dysfunctional nature as the Soviets. Until we can form new ways of social interaction and decision-making, we cannot say we live in a truly democratic society, because representative democracy is not democracy and never has been. Our system of voting takes ordinary people and turns them into immoral politicians. The politicians become corrupt, not because they want to, but because the system requires it. These people cannot be reformed, because the apparatus in which they work does not allow it. Trying to find the best politician is not the answer. The reason why is because politicians should not exist, nor should the system of representative democracy.
Okay, so if you believe much of what was said on that, or all of it, you kind of can get an idea where we're coming from. Democracy, as we believe it, is a very participatory thing that the citizens all take part in. You don't vote your power away to some representative who, on the federal level, each U.S. representative represents an average, I believe, of 650,000 people. I mean, how can it's not possible to represent. And besides, well, I'll get into the study later about money speaking more than the average citizen, but where were we on?
Okay, I was explaining, or I was going to explain specifically what we feel democracy is.
Right, right.
Okay, because people can write a lot of books on democracy. We have some of the good ones here, but you can go to a library and find shelves and shelves of books on quote-unquote democracy or democratic theory, which are, as far as I'm concerned, just about pure garbage, okay? Because they're talking about 95% of the time, they're talking about the representative system.
Right, most of them, yeah. Like I was raised, and everyone in this country was raised thinking, being told that this is a democracy, the greatest democracy on earth, in fact. And you know, this experiment in democracy, when actually, and you would know this better than I, having a doctorate in history, that at the time of the writing of the Constitution, the founders, as they call them, were not the only people in the argument. They were the Federalists, and there were the Anti-Federalists. And I think, and I believe you agree, and anyone in Democracy for the USA would agree, that we need to reopen, to revisit that argument, that debate about what this country should institute as democracy, not representative democracy. That's not really democracy.
No, the Anti-Federalists were opponents of the Constitution, because they saw that it was an oligarchy, and they called it that. They called it oligarchy, a tyranny, an aristocracy. They had all kinds of terms for this system, which are a lot more accurate than what people call it today, or tend to call it. So they felt that the government should consist of the people, of ordinary people. In those days, it would be the yeomen or the farmers. And that would have been a lot more similar to the Athenian democracy.
Right, where it was the Athenians who coined the term democracy, demos, the people, and krasi, to rule. And they not only coined the term, but they were the first ones to implement a form of democracy, the true form of democracy.
Yeah. And let me just point out to folks who aren't familiar with Athenian democracy, they had an assembly, an assembly of the people. It was about 6,000, and the assembly held about 6,000 people. It was held on this hillside called the Pnyx in Athens, right outside of the Agora.
Right. Well, you say 6,000 OC, but now we've got hundreds of millions in this country, and that's one argument that people bring up always is that, well, you know, how could you do that in a country that's this large? But actually,
we'll get to that, Bob.
we will get to that, but it can be done.
Right. I'm explaining right now
Yeah.
the fundamentals.
Right.
So the Athenians had their assembly where the citizens met. Now, it wasn't all the citizens because they couldn't all fit there, but they didn't see that as a problem because nobody wanted to meet all together all at the same time. You had people living out in the outlying areas, which could be several miles away from the city center. So people were satisfied that this was a representative sample of the people, 6,000, pretty much random Athenians, and it was a large body.
Of course, they didn't allow women and
Right.
slaves, but that was millennia ago.
Right.
So
We're talking about a different culture.
Right.
Right.
Right. It's the idea of the democracy, though.
Right.
That
Exactly. What we appreciate is the model.
Right.
And
The
today,
model.
obviously, everybody would be enfranchised. There would be no slaves, obviously. Okay. So I think that's a red herring when people attack the Athenian democracy for that specific reason.
Right.
But anyway, okay. So you had the Athenian assembly, and the second major institution of government that Athens had was actually even more interesting. It was the Council of 500. And whereas the Athenian assembly was, several thousand Athenians, you can't just come into an assembly and be ready to go.
Right.
You have to have an agenda, you have to have
Right.
order, you have to have people running the show. And that was the role of the Council of 500.
Yeah, there has to be structure.
Exactly, sure. And the Council of 500 was, as the name implies, 500 citizens chosen randomly, selected randomly. They had these machines like lottery
Right,
machines.
not elected, chosen randomly, much like our jurors are today,
Yeah.
chosen randomly from the pool of the citizenry.
Right. The principle is the same, except that our juries are very small. As a matter of fact, Athens had a third body of government, which was the courts, the Athenian courts, which were very large. They were on average 200. Well, not on average. But they were regularly 200 citizens, or rather, I'm sorry, I think 500 citizens. But in very important cases, they could double and triple that number of citizens. So you would have a body of some 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 people viewing, observing a case and judging and sentencing. They didn't have separate judges. So that even with the courts, where we have a vestige of democracy in our jury system, the Athenians way outdid us even on that, in that realm in the courts.
Right.
But we wouldn't need today a system of courts quite like that. They would be independent of the legislature and the executive.
Right.
We could
a
have
lot of things changed in a couple thousand years, and
Right.
I'm sure we can figure out how to adapt the basic model of democracy that the Athenians came up with, which was brilliant.
Right.
We should be able to adapt it to the contemporary times.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Right. And on our website, we have the specific model of this adaptation.
Right. democracyfortheusa.org. Maybe we should stick that on the screen, and you all can go to that. It's free.
Yeah.
Just go to it on the internet.
Right. Yeah, so that on our website, it lays it all out in detail with diagrams and explanations. So you have in Athens, you have the Athenian Council of 500, which the main purpose of that body was to draw up the agenda for the citizens to consider, and then the citizens would decide. So today, we would have that same basic system, but of course we can't have just one assembly. 300 million Americans
Yeah.
can't fit in any one place. So we would have community assemblies, or rather assemblies in all the communities of the country.
Right.
In Chicago alone, we would have at least 100, if not hundreds.
There are some very smart people around, and I'm sure that we could figure out the logistics of how to implement democracy in this country, and that's what we're all about. That's what we are pushing, advocating, and we're even doing some actions. We sort of have our own campaign, which is a "Do Not Vote" campaign, right? We target people coming into town for fundraisers, like when Hillary Clinton or Michelle Obama or any number of these big celebrity politicians come to have those $5,000, $15,000, $25,000 plate fundraiser dinners. We have a direct action where we put our banner up out front and pass out flyers explaining why we shouldn't vote.
Right. Yeah. That's the immediate, our immediate tactic, is getting people to not vote and to recognize that this government is an oligarchy. Let me go back just for a minute, though, and finish the system that we describe on our website. So you have the community assemblies in every, or rather assemblies in every community. That's the legislature, all the people deciding on the issues on the agenda. And then you have executive councils in at every level. So each community would have an executive council of 500. We propose 500. It doesn't have to be exactly that number, but that's a good number, because you need a large enough number to be a representative, a statistical representative sample.
Right.
Okay, and then at the city level or the county level, you would have a council of 500 for each city and each county. Each state would have a council of 500, and the nation would have a council of 500.
Setting the agenda for the state questions.
Right. The state,
right.
the Council of 500 would set agendas for the state. The National Council of 500 would set the agenda for the nation.
Right.
And
yet everyone in the community assemblies would be deciding on the issues of the state and the federal levels as well. Right.
When you would go into your community assembly, you'd have an agenda, and they would be in 4 parts. You'd have a community section with measures or questions or policies to decide at the community level.
Right, filling potholes.
Right, fairly simple things that we would hope. And then at the area level, like the citywide level, whether or not to have speed cameras. We know what people think about those and how they would decide on that.
Right.
Then at the state level, and then at the national level, whether or not we should go bomb Syria for the umpteenth time,
Right.
Or bomb Iraq rather, and Syria as well. So yeah, that's the basic system. Now,
I get it.
Yep. Now, getting back to your point about how we're opposing the people voting, okay? Because by voting, you're buying into the system.
Right. I think almost everyone has become aware of the corruption that is rampant at every level of politics, every level. I mean, it's I could have brought a bunch of figures, but you hear them every day. It's pathetic.
Yeah.
And a lot of people already don't vote, and so I think we've got those people convinced of that much anyway. They don't vote anyway.
Yeah.
But the voting's really just a tool of oligarchy.
Yeah.
That in my mind, it just they use it as a cloak of legitimacy for their otherwise not so grand schemes. You know, they're supposed to be serving the public, and I think the majority of politicians are more self-serving than public-serving.
Yeah.
That's a fact. You read it every day.
Yeah, they serve themselves and the corporations. They're paymasters.
So what do we have to do? What is it going to take? 2008 wasn't enough. You know, where the banks almost, you know, brought the country to its knees. Well, and then taxpayers bailed them out. It's kind of a funny deal how the profit is private, and yet any of the losses that they incur are public. It's a curious way of doing business. But you know, they repeat that old worn-out phrase, we have the best government money can buy.
Right.
And they pay for the legislation to further their agendas, and time after time after time, that's how it works. And on our website, we have a study that was recently released. I think it'll actually be in print in the journals or whatever later on, maybe early next year. But it's Professors
Gillen
and Page,
yeah.
And they did a study of I think 1,700 bills going through Congress over a 10-year period, and they have come to the conclusion, they have scientifically proven that the moneyed interests get legislation done the way they want it, and the average citizen has little or no impact. I mean, your voting doesn't matter. You vote someone in, and they're going to do what the money says. They always.
Congress is a millionaires club.
It is.
The senators are mostly millionaires. I think about half of the congressmen, the members of the House of Representatives, are millionaires, at least millionaires, and then the rest are pretty wealthy.
Yeah, they're not all quite in the 1%, but they're in the top 10%. The majority of them, I think, being millionaires.
Actually, the senators would probably be almost all in the top 1%.
You think?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Senators.
Yeah.
You know, it only takes like $200,000 to $300,000, I think, to be in the 1%.
Oh no, to be in the 1%, it takes a bit more.
Well, okay, whatever.
Millions, but
whatever. The senators are rich. Period.
Regardless,
okay.
Yeah.
And then most of the House members are quite rich. So what do you expect from these folks? Okay. They are, and then they answer to even richer people like the Koch brothers, the Bill Gateses, which are multi-billionaires. So those are the people that fund their campaigns for the most part. Barack Obama.
Sure, and they take care of themselves. I mean, what would you expect? I'd probably be as bad, or maybe worse. If I had been born into a wealthy family, you know, in the Hamptons or something, I'd probably, it's human nature.
Right.
But it's also human nature to rise up and organize and try and set things right. And that is hopefully what we're going to do with this organization, Democracy for the USA. We have a website, democracyfortheusa.org. Please go there and check it out. And we also have a weekly meeting, 7 p.m. at Multiculti, which is at 1000 North Milwaukee. And come and put your voice in. And we need to talk. Everyone needs to get together and discuss this. This really needs to be an issue. what type of government we're going to have. Everyone knows that it's broken. I keep hearing it time and time again on mainstream TV and on Democracy Now! It's a fact. It's not just gridlock. It's broken. It's totally, irretrievably broken.
Yeah, it's broken. It's broken for the 99%. It's doing quite well for the 1%.
Oh, yeah. But
and that was the design, by the way.
I know that truly was the design. Back when Mr. James Madison said that he was worried about democracy not protecting the minority of the opulent.
Right.
Well, and it's probably true.
Not probably. There's not probably about it.
Genuine democracy, people ruling, people gathering in community assemblies and deciding on the issues and where their tax money, because I imagine, people are going to want to willingly pay taxes to support the country, the society. You have to. And you have to have some structure, so the community assemblies and the Council of 500, it just needs to be put into place. And I think if people will assemble, that's the thing. Don't vote, assemble.
Yeah, we have a flyer that says just that. Don't vote, assemble instead.
Right, because voting has gotten us here.
Now, I'd like to say something about assemblies and how the occupiers treated them. Going back to Occupy, we don't want to spend that much time on Occupy.
Yeah.
But they didn't really value assemblies very much for reasons that we don't have to go into.
I know. I was surprised myself.
Yeah.
I was pretty nonplussed
Right.
about that, because when I entered the Occupy arena, there were, good numbers of people.
Early on.
Early on. And
Yeah.
then it got to where there was,
Right.
3 or 4
Yeah.
of us sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes 3,
Right.
sometimes 2
Right.
at a General Assembly.
Yeah, occupiers ultimately had, many of them, if not most of them, if not the vast majority of them, had an aversion to getting together with their fellow occupiers.
Yeah.
Now we have to change that attitude, and that's going to be one of our major tasks, to get people to understand that democracy is about people getting together and
Right.
making decisions collectively. That's
Right.
basically what democracy is.
That's democracy.
Exactly.
This representative democracy is not democracy.
Right.
That's our main point. And so I hope that you will all check out the website and even come to the meetings. If we get the groups get too large, Multiculti has quite a bit of room, but if it gets too large, we'll meet somewhere else. This is something we have to do, people. We have to do it. It's an imperative, actually. So.
Hey Bob, can I add one little quote from my book?
Well, I suppose.
This is from Athens, the history of Athens, which is part of my book, the Athenian democracy. In 432 BC, the Athenians and Spartans were on the verge of war. Okay, that was going to be that was the beginning of the Peloponnesian War.
Mm-hmm.
And Thucydides, who chronicled the war in his history of the Peloponnesian War, described how the decisions were made in Athens, and that's where we get actually our ideas or our knowledge of how Athens worked, mainly from that one book by Thucydides. So I'll just read a few sentences here. Thucydides is saying, many speakers came forward and opinions were expressed on both sides, some maintaining that war was necessary and others saying that the Megarian decree, and the war started because this one city-state, Megara, I guess it was, the Spartans and Athenians were fighting over access to their
We've
ports.
only got a few minutes
Right,
left
okay,
here.
okay.
So
Okay, whether or not the Megarian decree should be revoked and should not be allowed to stand in the way. Pericles then stepped forward to speak. He did not begin, as an American president would, with any such pronouncement as, "This is what I decided to do." As always in democratic Athens, he who addressed the assembly, from the humblest citizen to the greatest general, simply expressed his opinion as to what the Athenians collectively should do. "Athenians," Pericles said, my views are the same as ever. I am against making any concessions to the Spartans. I must give you exactly the advice I have given in the past, and I call upon those of you who are persuaded by my words to give your full support to these resolutions which we are making all together. Let none of you think that we should be going to war for a trifle if we refuse to revoke the Megarian decree. If you take a firm stand, you will make it clear to them that they have to treat you properly as equals. And now you must make up your minds what you are going to do." Thucydides concludes, "This was Pericles' speech. The Athenians considered that his advice was best and voted as he asked them to do, as he asked them to vote. The reply to the Spartans was the one that he had suggested. The ambassadors returned to Sparta without satisfaction, and no further embassy was sent." Now, my point in reading this is that, as you'll note, Pericles always addressed the Athenians as you. Okay, what do you think? You all decide. Okay, and that's the difference in a kernel, in just a few sentences, between what we have now, an oligarchy, where President Obama or whoever the president is comes and says, "I'm going to bomb Syria.
Yeah.
I'm going to bomb Iraq. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that."
Oh,
no.
I'd like to add something.
Sure.
A final note. There's something I read, a review recently, I think, of Henry Kissinger's new book. It's called New Order or World Order.
I wouldn't know about
World
it. I
Order
wouldn't
or
read Henry
something.
Kissinger's book if you paid me.
But what caught my eye was Hillary Clinton, I think, was giving a review of it or something, and somewhere it was said that we need to develop more participatory democracy. I was floored. I don't know which one of them was saying it, if it was Kissinger or Hillary, but I mean, talk is cheap, but I was surprised to see that even.
I have no idea.
I don't, yeah. Well, maybe on our next program we'll delve deeper into that little thing. I'll get the exact quote, but I was surprised they mentioned participatory democracy, because that's what we're all about. Democracy for the USA. Democracy with a small d. And that's about it for our show. And thanks for tuning in. And come to the meetings. Come to our meetings and at least check out our website. All right? I'm happy to have filled you in on a little bit of the truth in politics today. That's about it. So